All right, at this time, we will call to order the City of Kenai Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for September 8th, 2021. Will you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item A2, roll call, please.
Chair Twait,
Here.
Commissioner Halstead,
Here.
Commissioner Woodard,
Here.
Commissioner Greenberg is absent, Commissioner Douthat,
I knew it was on.
Here.
Commissioner Springer,
Here.
Vice Chair Fikes is absent. You have a quorum.
All right, make sure your phones are silenced. Item A3, agenda approval. Wishes of the commission. Commissioner Halstead.
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Any objections? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Item A4, consent agenda. Commissioner Halstead.
I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
And a second.
I will second that.
All right, any objections? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved. Takes us to item C, scheduled public comments. We have none. Item D is unscheduled public comments. Anyone wishing to come forward and speak to an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we will keep moving along then. We have no consideration of plats under item E, so it takes us to item F, public hearings. We have one, Resolution PZ 2021-34, recommending the Kenai City Council amend Kenai Municipal Code 14.20.150, conditional use permits to clarify roles and responsibilities of applicants, the planning director, and the planning commission in the conditional use process and make housekeeping changes. Can I get a motion, please? Commissioner Springer.
I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number PZ 2021-34, recommending the Kenai City Council amend Kenai Municipal Code 14.20.150 conditional use permits.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, staff report.
Thank you, Chair Twait and fellow commissioners. The staff report this evening is on the resolution PZ 2021-34. Now, this was an ordinance that was introduced to council on September 1st and was sponsored by Vice Mayor Malloy. And with that introduction, there's also a memo to postpone for the public hearing for this evening to send it to the Planning and Zoning Commission tonight, specifically for a public hearing. And so, a couple of things I just wanted to note before we kind of dig into these proposed text changes, that the approach is a little bit different than other times when ordinances, that are getting approved by council often come through for an action approval. It's different this evening where this is actually drafted as a resolution from the commission. And I think there's the potential for consideration and potential recommendations for changes on these draft language changes this evening. This is our only item on the agenda this evening, so I thought we might take a little bit of time and actually read through each of the recommended changes or draft changes. And again, this is specifically to KMC 14.20.150 conditional use permits. So it's specifically for conditional use permits. So already it's sort of a narrow section of code as far as what the commission has purview over in Title 14. And the other thing I would say about it, and it's in the subject resolution, make housekeeping changes. And I think that's really kind of the approach in this draft. Is it's really to take a look at low-hanging fruit for the code, specifically for conditional use permits. So the on the packet, most of these changes, there's about 9 overall changes. are really only on 2 pages. This is on page 8 and 9 of the packet for those who'd like to follow along, as well as the memo has a brief description of what each one of these changes are and sort of that intent for the change. So the first one is to add a final sentence to the paragraph, A, intent. That change, as you can see here, underlined means added text to the existing code. That draft change is the grant, denial, modification, or revocation of a conditional use permit is discretionary. That's always been the case. That's been the practice of conditional use permits, is that they're discretionary based on the commission's decision on a conditional use permit. This is a housekeeping. It really spells that out and just makes it clear that indeed it's discretionary based on the commission's decision on each case. The second change, this is another addition, that's a B, pre-application meeting. And this is requiring the applicant to have a pre-application meeting with myself, the planning director, or a designee. So I'm gonna read this draft new section of code. B, pre-application meeting. Every conditional use permit applicant must contact the planning director for a pre-application meeting with the planning director or designee before the application is submitted to the commission in order to ensure applications are complete and the applicant is familiar with the conditional use permit public hearing process. If an application is determined to be incomplete by the planning director, the application may be resubmitted to the planning director with changes or new information as many times as necessary, or the applicant may request a review with the city manager, whose determination shall be final. The review by the planning director is to determine that sufficient information is presented to allow the commission a meaningful review and has no bearing on whether an application should be granted or denied by the commission. Other commissions that I've worked with other municipalities had this as a requirement, and so I do think this is actually from my perspective of receiving applications, from an applicant, to do a sit-down meeting is really beneficial to ensure that we have a complete application and information. I'll just say in my brief time, with the city, there are times where we receive an application and it's just somebody dropped it off, and then we're from that point trying to figure out what this application is for. What's the intent, and oftentimes having to contact and ask for follow-up information, ask for missing components, ask for so to have this sit-down meeting that might only be 15, 20, 30 minutes, I think could be really beneficial to help both myself in processing application as well as the applicant, because it's not just having that completed application which really kicks off the review process, but also we can explain the overall process from really start to finish of an application to the applicant, to give them a better understanding of what to expect with an application that requires a public hearing. The third item, this is under applications. These are a few additional changes to just really clarify information to make sure we have significant information for the applicant, so we can see applications 1, name and address of the applicant, and name and address of the property owner if not the applicant. Applications 3, the street address and a legal description of the property involved. 4, a description of the proposed use and how the use satisfies the review criteria. This is something that is actually often, to have that pre-application meeting actually really helps. We often get a lot of blanks or question marks or answers that really don't have to do with the review criteria with our applications. 5, a conceptual drawing. This is, a lot of these applications don't right now require to have some sort of sketch site plan concept plan. To have that in here as a requirement for the application can just really help, again, have a complete application from submission. The fourth item, this is to add a sentence to applications. The application as its plans shall be posted to the city's website at time of publication of commission packet. Now, the packet does get posted to the city's website. It gets posted with all the planning commission, agenda and packet items. I think the idea here is to do something a little different, and I've actually worked with other municipalities that have done this, is for these types of, well, specifically conditional use permits, is it can be on, we're thinking maybe the landing page of the planning department or something along those lines to make it a little bit easier to see, especially from the public's perspective, conditional use permit applications on the website. So the idea is that we could include, a web page with, information and probably links to the packet, just to make it a little easier to kind of see what's going on with conditional use permit applications and public hearings. Okay, on page 9, this change is under public hearing. An applicant or representative of the applicant must be present in person or by remote device for the application to be considered at the public hearing. Again, this is another one where I have experience with other commissions and municipalities where that is a requirement. I think it's really significant to add this in, again, from my perspective, and I would think for the commission in that to have the applicant required to be there to answer questions. Sometimes it's just basic questions that the commission or staff or the public might have of an applicant. As well as to give them the opportunity to present. So not necessarily just answer questions, but also present their case. And we'll talk a little bit more about burden of proof addition. So these two are sort of related, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Next is under review criteria. And these are the 6 conditions, the review criteria for conditional use permit consideration. Under 2, this is, I think, a clarification. The economic and non-economic value of the adjoining property or neighborhood will not be significantly impaired. I think that was always been sort of the case. I think this just clarifies it. And sort of specifies where before it just said the value of the adjoining property. Here it just helps make it a little more clear that the economic and non-economic values could be considered under this criteria. Next, we have under review criteria as well, the commission may approve with conditions, or deny the application. The commission must make specific findings in its decision addressing all 6 of the required criteria stated above. Any relevant evidence may be considered by the commission in its decision. Again, I think this is sort of how it's worked in practice, but to spell this out, I think really helps. And it's something I know I've talked with the commission a lot about, again, to be providing, the findings of where you as a commission are landing on a particular case and what your findings and sort of decision-making process on a case is. And that, again, the any relevant evidence may be considered by the commission in its decision. That's, again, always really been the case. It's been the sort of policy, if you will. But again, that a public hearing, the idea is that the commission, you're getting a lot of information from a lot of different parties, whether it's, from staff, presentation of the staff report, the applicant, giving a presentation or answering questions, those folks with standing, from the area of the conditional use permit and so forth. Again, this is just really a sort of a housekeeping, making this very clear. Next, F, burden of proof. The applicant for a conditional use permit has the burden to show by substantial evidence that the 6 criteria above are satisfied. Substantial evidence is such relevant evidence a reasonable mind might accept as adequate to support a conclusion. And again, I think this ties closely with the public hearing addition as well, that the applicant or representative of the applicant would be present at the hearing. And so it really shows that when it comes to a conditional use permit application, you have a property owner who's asking for consideration and approval from the commission, that this shows that the burden is on that applicant as the applicant and as the property owner and the one who would really directly benefit from that approval, from the commission. Again, I think this has sort of been the, lack of a better term, sort of practice of what's occurred, but to clarify it and to codify it, I do think really helps. And then lastly, under G, staff report, the planning director or designee will provide a staff report on the application to the commission at the public hearing. The staff report may contain any information deemed pertinent by the planning director or designee and may include a recommendation and proposed findings on whether the requirements of this chapter have been met and whether any additional specific conditions are recommended. The commission may consider the recommendations of the planning director or designee, but shall accord it no deference. The staff report does not relieve the applicant's burden of proof. Again, this is to clarify. I think this has been the case. This has been the practice, that as far as providing that staff report, the presentation, the recommendations, and the draft, and that's maybe the best way to put it is, with that recommendation comes those draft recommendations that would be included in a resolution, those conditions of a conditional use permit. It's always been that's for the commission to decide. These are just draft ones that I bring forward that are sort of my professional recommendation on that. But as we know, the commission can ignore those, add some, make changes to recommended conditions of approval and so on. And again, so this is, I feel, again, a housekeeping to really clarify that the staff report and presentation, doesn't have any deference, for the commission's consideration, and that the staff report doesn't relieve the applicant's burden of proof. And I would say that in the past, not requiring an applicant to attend, the hearing or make a presentation and potentially not be able to answer questions, sort of it makes it easier to maybe put that burden of proof on the staff report and presentation. So by requiring the applicant to attend, present, answer questions, sort of makes this, a little bit easier to ensure that it's the applicant's burden of proof when it comes to their application and the consideration of their application. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer, any questions you may have. Again, this is a draft. This is a draft from city attorney, myself, Vice Mayor Malloy, city clerk, all kind of coming together to put together this housekeeping. Draft changes to the conditional use permit section of code, and happy to answer questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll get public hearing first, yep. So we will open it up for public testimony now, and just a little background or a little rule making, I guess. 3 minutes. I'm assuming all of you are going to testify. You may not. But get your 3 minutes in. When it dings, wrap up what you're saying there, and we'll stop at that point. Somebody else may be picking up on something that you wanted to continue saying. If you haven't, when we're all done, if I feel like you need to bring something back up here to us, I'll probably allow that. I'm going to ask Vice Mayor Malloy first if he has any want or desire to come up and add anything before we open it up kind of to the public.
Thank you. Just say no. Respectfully, thank you, Chair Tway. My name is Robert Malloy. I'm Vice Mayor, and I guess I'll give my address as this building tonight. I'm also at 513 Ash Avenue. Thank you very much for working on this tonight. It's your procedure. And I'm just here to listen to what you have to say, and so there may be some, amendments or whatever to the ordinance, depending on what some of your recommendations are coming out of this for things that might not be in it, that like some other remedies that you might want or whatever, like Chairman Fikes mentioned the other night. But I'm here to listen and then go forward with it. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and let the public start. So whoever wants to come up first, state your name and address for the record. And your 3 minutes will start when your mouth opens. Well, it might start earlier for some.
Never having been one to be too reticent, I'll go ahead and get up here. Rick Baldwin, 3080 Kemenange Court, Kenai. My thanks to the Commission for entertaining this, to Vice Mayor Malloy for working on it, for Mr. Foster for working on it. I think this is very helpful, and I'm here just to support this ordinance as it is. And then to maybe make one observation of some, maybe a betterment, that what I would see would be a betterment to this ordinance, to plug what I believe could be a very big hole in your process. Having had some experience recently with your procedures, when I was at the last public hearing, I noticed that the applicant made several representations to the council about the certain limitations that would be on his business. For example, the number of people in the lodge, the number of guests that would be there, the number of actual boats that he would be running out of his operation, the quiet hours that he would observe, other limitations on his operation. And it seemed as though both the council and the planning commission were quite engaged with trying to sort out the details of exactly how he proposed to operate, without ever considering the fact that none of these representations were at all binding, and that once he got his permit, he was free to operate that permit to the limits allowed by that permit. And I feel like that you should not allow yourselves to get sucked into giving a permit based on one set of representations and then have the bait and switch pulled on you, on the citizens of Kenai. And I think that my recommendation would be that you maybe make some changes to your ordinance that would at least to somewhat prevent that from happening. I have two specific recommendations that I'll give you in the next 45 seconds, I guess. One, that paragraph E6 be amended to say that the permit shall reflect all special restrictions or conditions under which the applicant proposes to operate. So if he proposes to say to put some limitations, hold him to it by putting it in writing on the permit. And then second of all, perhaps, my apologies, Mr. Foster, but to put the burden on the planning director to smoke out those representations at the beginning. So if he comes in and he tells the planning director, these are the limitations that I'm proposing to operate. I'm not proposing 10 people in my operation, only 6. I'm not proposing 3 boats, only 1. That the planning director provide a report to the commission that would include what special limitations he's been able to determine. Thank you.
I'll see if anyone has any questions for you. All right, very good.
Thank you.
All right, who's next?
My name's Rusty Huff. I live at 765 Ames Road, also own property in Chalk subdivision. And I'm here to support this ordinance, and I'd like to follow up a little bit on what Rick said. Part of the problem with the conditional use permits is, like he says, somebody gets a permit, it says conditional use permit, and these conditions, whatever they are, most of the time aren't firmed up in stone. And so like he says, it's, once they get them, they add more cabins, they add more boats, they add more people, they add more traffic, more and more and more. They start serving food, they start serving liquor. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And us as residents in the neighborhood don't have any recourse from what we've found out in the past. We've complained, we've done some things to try to remedy it. And for some reason, we can't get anything done. So we'd like to have a little bit of teeth in the ordinance that says, hey, if you're not following the conditions of your permit, which you agreed to, then we have a recourse to either shut the guy, whoever's doing it down, or make them, you know, toe the line, some sort of way for us to remedy the situation. So this is a good start. I like Rick's recommendation on that. I don't want to get into specifics with our past experience, but as far as the planning, Mr. Foster's position in the planning department, where, you know, somebody can come in or get online and fill out an application, and then Mr. Foster picks out the code book and says, yeah, that's allowed, and advocates for these people to do these things without checking out the density of the neighborhood, if there's any other conditional use permits in the neighborhood, if it's consistent with the neighborhood, does it follow the comprehensive plan? What about zoning? To me, on our last thing that we went through, to me, I thought the planning department ignored all those facts. And that's why we're here doing this. That's why we had to go before the city council. And I just think it's a hell of a burden on the property owners to have to do that, when it should be on the burden of the person that's applying for a permit. And I think that there's some 6 criteria in here, and now these people have to prove that what they're doing is within those scopes. And I appreciate the work that you've all done to do this. So that's really all I've got to say, and I hope that you support this. And I think it will help a lot. This conditional use process, I think, is like 35, 40 years old. And, you know, our neighborhoods have all grown up around rural residential. Rural residential, to me, is wide open. There's people with conditional use permits that got them 30 years ago and there was nobody else around. Now we have big neighborhoods, we have lots of people, professional people, young people. Things have changed, so this is a good change for us. We appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
That's how you do it, right there. We'll see if anyone has any questions for you. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Next.
Hello, my name is Frances Urick, and this is Mark Urick, and our address is 3065 Kim and Ange Court, Kenai. We support Vice Mayor Malloy's ordinance amendments and the recommendations to improve the amendments from our fellow Kenai residents. The amendments will help make the process more transparent, more equitable, and will support the comprehensive plan to protect the quality of life in Kenai. Thank you.
Very good. We'll see if anyone else has any questions for you. All right, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
Hi, my name's Mary Jean Loveland, 945 Ames Road. It's at the end of the cul-de-sac, and it butts up right on Angler property. We also own some property on Angler as well. And I'm in support of this ordinance. I would like it to be a little more in that it has checks and balances. Like Mr. Huff said, once you get a conditional use permit, more. I wish there was something in there where there was a review once a year, once every 5 years, not the report that they have to send in that's part of the conditional use permit, but something that will make them prove that they're doing what they say they're gonna do. Property next door to me has a conditional use permit for 5 cabins and guided fishing services. They are now allowed by whatever process to have a nightclub, a bar, a restaurant, RV parking, rental cars. So I would like there to be checks and balances to say in the conditional use permit, you do what you say you're gonna do, and that's your conditions, and if you go outside of that, you need to reapply, and it does say that in here. If you're outside the bounds of your condition, or your permit, you gotta reapply, especially if there's property owner changes. But I'd like to add just a little bit more onto the owner of the permit to make sure that they do what they say they're gonna do.
All right. Any questions? Oh, there, I knew it.
In the time that your neighbor has had his conditional use permit, have you ever had to call on any kind of enforcement for excessive noise or too many people? I mean, have you personally called in?
That conditional use permit's been in place since 1988, and everything was fine until about 4 or 5 years ago, and the management of that property changed. And I personally have not called, but my husband has called, who's back there, and a couple of my other neighbors have called. The noise is such that my windows vibrate. There's amplified music. There's, yeah. And back when it was just 5 cabins and guiding service, there was no problem at all. They were there, they were running their business, but when it expanded with the new management, a term I heard the last planning and zoning meeting I was at, Katie barred the door.
So you don't think there was a satisfactory resolution, or there was nothing, a follow-up or anything on to you as far as?
I believe it is still in progress, and as Attorney Bloom had said the last meeting that I was attending, nobody is happy yet, but we've been working on it for 4 years. So it'd be nice if there was a time period in the conditional use permit process as well, because it's still an ongoing issue. And nobody's happy, the conditional permit use owner isn't happy, and neighbors aren't happy. We'd like somebody to be at least somewhere in between where we can live with each other.
Anyone else? All right, thank you.
My name is Jim Richardson. I'm the neighbor on the other side of the property that was just being discussed. And there have been, as you've heard from lots of people, there have been numerous calls over the years. And it did change about 4 years ago with a new operator who is in violation of any number of things you could think about. I don't need to spend your time on it, but I've been a property owner on Angler Drive for 31 years. It's changed a lot. I was there when I bought my property. There was one conditional use permit, and it's changed. I had neighbors that lived there all year round. We had people working that were, had jobs, had kids, or school teachers, and things changed. And during the big years of salmon activities, people got sort of driven out. And now if you go down there, there's very few people that are full-year residents. You can decide as a planning department, as a planning commission, if that's really the direction that you want the town to go. But if you go down there, it's a ghost town right now, unless you've come from planet Mars, you know that the fishery resource is in a pretty low level right now, and there's no particular reason to believe it's going to change in the immediate future. But those people are either non-operating or desperate and willing to cut corners and do whatever it is to try and get by. But in any case, your actions do have a big effect over time, and I'd encourage you. I really support the proposed changes. I think that would be a big improvement and would allow people like me. But even at that, I mean, we have done everything to jump through all of the hoops that we can. We've met with the city, we've met with your chief of police, we've met several times, we've met with the city manager, and we have yet to make any progress whatsoever. The person does what they want, And actually they've moved on to sort of retribution. They're annoyed because we've complained. So now we get little accolades over the loudspeaker advising us what we can do with ourselves. So anyway, that was all that I wanted to say. I really appreciate the, the, the proposed changes, and I certainly support this. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll see if we got any questions. All right, very good, thank you. Next. There we go.
Christine Schmidt, 513 Ash Avenue. Full disclosure, Vice Mayor Malloy is my spouse. So I also support this ordinance as something that I have come and testified about over the years, some gaps in the ordinance. And I think it's a really great idea for you to put in writing what your practices are so that everybody is on the same page. And it's, you know, it's not just something that you're talking about, but the applicant will know, and the people in the neighborhood will know what your practices are. I also think that Rick Baldwin brought up a good point, which is that what are the parameters of the operation, that should be more spelled out, and that the conditional use permit should basically make it to where a person who wants to expand their operation beyond what their permit allows should have to come back and supplement and file another application. I also would like to see I guess I would like to see this go a little bit farther, but I think this is a really good place to start, because what you're doing is putting in writing what your practices are. But I'd like to see more in the criteria, a little bit more detail. For example, when it says it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, you know, people can cherry pick out of that comprehensive plan, you know, to support their point of view. So it's not that's a very vague standard. And another thing that comes up a lot is that there are subdivision covenants and that prohibit certain businesses. And I guess from my point of view, when I first moved here in the 80s, at the time the city actually had in their conditional use permit application, it asked if you had subdivision covenants that prohibited this use. And if you said yes, the city wouldn't follow through to process your permit. And I guess what we're told, you know, by the city is, well, we don't enforce your covenants. But I guess I would just say, though, well, don't give people a license to violate them then. So I'd like to see something about that. You know, that'd be one of the criteria that at least would weigh against adopt or granting a permit. So that's all I have to say. Good job. Thank you.
Don't go yet, because I have a question for you, if no one else does. So you mentioned in harmony with the comprehensive plan, and I agree with you. That's kind of an ambiguous term. Also, I think the economic and non-economic impact, that one is also, I think, you can justify that and struggle that. Do you have any suggestions on what? I've toyed with the idea of saying, well, you know what, maybe we should have a licensed real estate broker say there will be no, you know, economic impact to this conditional use going in next to this place. But I mean, everybody out there that is opposed to it will come up here every time and say, 100% it's going to lower my property values. Not always the case, but they feel like that. But that then puts us up here like, what? You know, we're cherry picking it, if you will. I mean, there's no guideline to follow for that. Do you have any suggestions on that?
It says value right now, and I think what I've seen over the years is that that the commission has gravitated to the idea of property value, like the borough value and the fair market value. And if you can't come in and have a realtor that says it will affect your fair market value, then people have sort of dismissed the complaints of people. And that's why I think it's important to say that the economic value is one thing, because it is possible for realtors to say that if this certain use comes in, like if it's some kind of nuisance use, that it will impact the value of the surrounding property. But when you say non-economic value, I think if you just read those decisions in your packet, those decisions include some of those things, such as some of the particular neighborhoods that don't have conditional uses in them. So that will impact, so that's their neighborhood is pretty all residential, so that's a value that you could look at. So yeah, you're right, that it's vague no matter what. It's vague when you say value, but in my experience, people have only looked at the economic value, and there's other values that you could look at when it comes to reviewing these conditional use permits, such as what kind of neighborhood do you have, you know, what are we trying to accomplish with this zoning and so forth. So I guess I don't have an answer to make it more clear from those words that are used in the current proposal, but I think they're definitely better than just saying the word value and letting everybody figure out what that means in their mind.
All right, thank you. Good to see you.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Well, like I said, we'll go through everybody here, and we'll see. There we go.
Hey, I'm Rick Davis. I live at 785 Ames Road, and the packet's great, but like everybody said, it needs teeth. There's creep, and I've been going up and down that creek for 20-something years, and one dock, one boat, one dock, one boat, one dock. You go past Ron's house, and it's one dock, 8 boats, one dock, 6 boats, one dock, 5 boats. It's crazy, and I think it's E2, the economic thing. Is it E2? Economic, non-economic? What you were just talking about? It's hugely different. I mean, if you go look at somebody's house, like my neighbor's, in October, it's worth a lot more. But if you go in December, when Hobo Jim's playing next door, and some drunk guys playing the bongos, it ain't worth crap. So, you just gotta add teeth to the thing. It's important, and determining the economic value, I say it's pretty tough. You're gonna have to figure that out.
Agreed.
Because like I said, during the summer it's different than during the winter. Especially if, we're not businesses, we're just private citizens. That's what I think. Teeth. However you do that, I don't know. The rest of it looks pretty good.
All right. Anyone have any questions? All right. Thanks, sir.
Okay.
Anyone else? You want a little bit more? Let's have a little more if you really want some. And I'll let Rick have some too.
Rick Baldwin, I'm still at 38 Kiminans Court. This is just a real boring part, but I think it's important for future hearings and maybe just the people that come to the future hearings and want to testify. One of the gaps that well, I don't want to say it's a gap, but it was unclear to me at the beginning of the hearing or the procedure what the procedures really were. I think it would really help if you could have a procedure manual so that people would know things like the limitations on how long somebody's allowed to talk, whether or not you can share time, whether or not this procedure applies to one application, or if you got 5 people, whether or not they all get the same amount of time. We made a tactical error at the beginning because we had a lot of people, and we filed only one appeal. And we learned from that after the fact that our time was really truncated. We had a lot of people with a lot of things that they wanted to say, but we really had to, squeeze it in. That was to your advantage because you didn't have a lot more to listen to, but not so much to the people being able to, at least for the first time, present their information to you. And if that were in a written procedure, I think that would really be helpful. Just a little handout at the outset that says this is how we go. So that's my only other thought, and that is, if I had to do it again, and I don't plan on it, I'd be a lot better at it in terms of being able to provide you with the information I thought that you needed. But just a suggestion.
Very good. Anyone have any questions now? All right, thank you.
My name is Rusty Huff. I'm at 765 Ames Road, and I just wanted to kind of follow up a little bit on the economic and other values of the property. Most of us sitting here, we probably don't give a damn about the economic value of our property. We know what it's worth. And I kind of resent the idea of the planning department coming in and advocating for a conditional use permit and saying that it's not going to affect the economic value significantly. To me, if it's 50 cents, it's that's my money. It's not for the planning department to decide which way the property values go up in my neighborhood, right? So, and the fact that I don't want to get on you there, Mr. Foster, but you're not a real estate expert, so I don't know how you come up with those recommendations, I should say. So I have a problem with that. The other thing that we have a problem with is, like we said, like enforcement. We just would like a little bit of a way for us to deal with problems that come up. I think that it covers most everything else. I don't agree with that. People having 2 years to rectify a violation. I think that's the way that it's written in there. Now they have if they're not within their taxes and they don't pay their taxes, and they have a year to take care of that, and they can file an appeal and get 2 years. And so this could potentially drag on for a long period of time in order to have somebody that's running a business in a residential neighborhood. So I personally, I don't like the idea of businesses in residential neighborhoods because it's a residential neighborhood. It's not a commercial neighborhood. That brings me to one of the things that I've been told by realtors is that about 80% of their calls from people outside that want to come up here and start a business, they want to start it in residential neighborhoods because it's cheaper. They don't have to have the fire marshal come in and check their stuff. They don't have to pave their parking lots. They pay less in taxes. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And that's to the detriment of the people that already live there. And so I just think it kind of steps on a lot of people's rights, their property rights, their values. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So personally, I don't like the conditional use permit process in residential neighborhoods at all. That's my personal opinion. So I'll leave it at that.
Anyone have any questions? So just so I want to clarify. So you're asking us we should take out the economic impact completely out of the process or not?
I guess that for me, the weight of it to have our planning department come in and advocate for somebody to have a conditional use permit based on the fact that it won't significantly impact your property values. Now, this particular area that we were talking about before, there's probably 6 pieces of property on the creek that may or may not go up in value. I believe that they're more valuable the way they are, especially with people with money. They don't want all that traffic. They don't want all that stuff up there. So in my opinion, they're worth more the way they are. Now, if they do start guiding there, and you have, like you say, 5 boats, 6 boats, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Potentially, you could have people in there at 3 o'clock in the morning running in and out of there, cars. And what's that do to the other 35 property owners? I mean, their stuff goes in the tank. So you have 5 properties that may go up in value and 30 that go down in value. And not just that neighborhood, but you got the whole surrounding neighborhood with it. So I think if you were to go knock on people's doors and ask, I would say that the resounding opinion would be that they don't like that in their neighborhood. Especially a high density type business like a bed and breakfast or guiding business or lodges or where there's people constantly coming in and out all times of night and day. So that's
All right.
that answers your question.
It does. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, there you go. Come on.
My name is Bobby Baldwin. I'm related to the man who's spoken twice. I live at 3080 Kiminange Court with him. And I just have a small, if you're going to do procedures for people who come to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then sometimes those decisions go on to the City Council. I just have one small point for you to include, and that is, when we came before you, you granted one application and you denied another. And both parties appealed those two decisions. But when we came before the City Council, Mr. Foster presented his staff report, which was, in one case, different than your decision. And no one represented the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision in the appeal. So your thinking and your decision-making on one of those issues was not represented at the appeals hearing. And I feel like it should have been. So just wanted, if you're going to do a spelling out of procedures, it might be important to have your decision represented. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
If there's any members of the public on
yeah.
Zoom who would like to testify, you may unmute at this time.
All right, so this is the auction part. Going once, going twice. Anyone else? Last chance. All right. Oh, well, okay. You know what? I will, just because. But I'll make it. I'll let you have a little bit.
I want to be short. I had a career
And if you could, just again for the
Jim
record.
Richardson, 1015 Angler Drive. I had a 40-year career as an economist, and I just would encourage you to leave the economic impact stuff into there. You can put an economic impact on anything, and it's something that you can quantify and defend, and lots of different methods. So I think that that's a good thing to have in there. But I also, just a little, the city has a dog in this fight too, and I'm a good example. I only lived part-time down here and still do because I have a house in Anchorage, and my long-term goal for 30 years was to move down here and live full year round, and I can't do that now. My wife is not comfortable because of the activities in the neighborhood. She's scared to be in our house here by herself. Last summer we had 4 trespass incidents. I was out of the house. 2 men came twice looking to gain access to our property. And you know, that has an effect on me, but it also has an effect on you. I'm not going to be down here full years because I can't deal with the situation. So it affects, it's not just one way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else? All right. Seeing none, we will close the public hearing now and bring it back to the commission. Mr. Bloom, did you have anything that you were going to want to chime in on?
Thank you, Chairman Twait. I don't have anything at this time. I understood that there, from Councilmember Malloy, that there may have been a desire to specify what happens if a party doesn't show up to a hearing. And I had if the commission wanted to specify that, I had a recommendation, but I won't make that recommendation at this time.
Okay, great. And I think might come up, so we'll remember that. All right, commission members, Mr. Greenberg out on Zoom. Anybody else who wants to take a stab at anything? Commissioner Dothett.
Maybe I'm just reading it wrong. On section G, on the very last sentence there, when it's talking about revocations, and it's the last sentence, it says, if the administrative official determines the permit holder is in compliance with the conditions, is that supposed to be non-compliance or in compliance? I couldn't, there's a lot of it's talking about violations of the condition. Is that supposed to be a?
So we're on page 18, correct?
Page 10, excuse me.
Page 10.
Sorry.
Oh. Okay, can you restate that? Just
I'm just looking on that last line, because it's talking about non-compliance issue and compliance notices, is this referring to it says if the administrative official determines the permit holder is in compliance with the conditions of the subsection, it shall send a notice to the compliance to commission and the permit holder? So is that saying that after they've fixed the revocation issues, or is that talking about if they haven't fixed those?
Mr. Foster.
Thank you, Chair Twait. Commissioner Douthit. Yeah, let me actually back up a little bit just to make sure. The commission shall not revoke the permit until the permit holder has been notified and given reasonable opportunity to correct the deficiencies or to provide information relating to or rebutting the alleged deficiencies. Appeals from decisions under this section shall be made in accordance with the provisions of KMC 1420-290 if the administrative official determines the permit holder is in compliance with the conditions in this subsection. It shall send a notice of compliance to the commission and the permit holder. I believe that is the case. That's why I interpret it that within this revocation and notification process, that at some point, if it was to be, rectified, if there was, let's say, a notice of violation of code or of their conditional, use permit, that they have that opportunity to resolve that issue. And if that is done, then it's saying here the administrative official would provide that notification that the compliance had then been met. That's the way I interpret it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then onto that caveat there, is it also done where we would get notified as a commission if they were in non-compliance at the same time that the permit holder is determined to be non-compliance? Because I know with some of this, they've been given letters or something like that, and as commission, we don't know what's going on with that. And I was just curious if that would be something we could add if it's not, to where if we've got somebody that's in violation and we've sent notices that the commission can be notified of that also? I don't know how that would work.
Well,
Chair Twait, Commissioner Douthit, that's an interesting thought. I would say, again, in the limited time that I've been with the city, I have been providing just updates of when a notice of violation occurs, but haven't gone into details. And I think my approach at that point is because that can be resolved before it gets to the commission, and really not looking to engage the commission who would oversee a revocation, to maybe get too involved in that process of being, staff providing that, notice of code violation letter. It gives, a window to have that violation or issue be, resolved. That's just sort of the top of the head, thing that comes to mind for me is, just because that letter's been sent out, it doesn't mean a revocation hearing's been, scheduled, or I just feel like there might be some consideration of those sort of being, separate, from the commission. At least with the process that we have here, but I do think that's an interesting thought.
Yeah, the way I just look at it is it looks like we get notified if they fix the issues and they're
Yes.
back in compliance.
Yes.
But we're not seeing the process until it goes to our final report or something. I guess that would be the time that we would see it as our report on the first of the year when we're reissuing the permits. If there were revocation issues, would we see it then?
We could see it then, as well as if a revocation hearing is scheduled as well. And then again, that's the commission is the decision maker when it comes to a revocation hearing. Yeah.
And at that revocation hearing, if there was a series of, say they had a letter issued and then they fixed that, and then later on they had another letter issued and then, okay, they resolved that, and then finally it came to a head, would we see that history, or is it just gonna be the one revocation hearing? Because there's a series of things that might lead up to compounding on an effect of a serious, repeat offender, so to speak, that it might help us in our decisions if we were notified that these things are going on. That's all at some point, I think, whether it's at the time the notice is given, or at least at the revocation hearing, we would be able to go back, okay, there's X, and Y, and Z, these are all been rectified up to this point, but now we're at a hearing, and that would show us a history. That's all I'm trying to, because I see a lot of what everybody's saying is, and it seems like a hole in the system to me is, as the commissioner, I'm not exactly sure, I guess, it's kind of, as far as the enforcement of the revocation, how that would work, and are there penalties or fines associated with that? I mean, maybe that's in KMC that I haven't done enough research on that yet or not, but like who enforces it? What are the fines for these kind of things? Is there a set statute, so to speak, that says it's going to be first violation is this much money, and second violation is this, and the third time they're going to get fully revoked for X number of months? Or I see in there where it says they have 9 months immediate proceeding if one's for reconsideration of a permit, the very last on page 12. Permit shall not be considered for subsequent similar conditional use permits denied after 9 months. So there's a time frame there, but that's really all I'm seeing as far as, not a lot of black and white, I guess, as far as the fines and penalties in the process of enforcement. We're granting these things, and I'm not seeing the black and white. This is what's going to happen if you don't do this. I don't know, maybe the attorney can help.
Yep, that's where we're going to go. We'll let Mr. Foster take it at ease with that one, and we've got the city attorney here for that. Thank you, Mr. Bloom.
So, thank you, Commissioner Twait and Commissioner Dothett. So this is your opportunity to, by motion, make any amendments that you would like to suggest to the city council. So if you'd like to see every revocation letter that we send out, now's your opportunity to amend this so you can see it. I mean, it's certainly appropriate to ask Mr. Foster, what the process is and ask his opinion on it, but if you're certainly not required to agree with him. So now's your opportunity, if you want to see a change in the process, to make a motion, and we will bring that to the city council when they consider this. We certainly could bring, Mr. Foster recently sent out a revocation notice. It's a public document. People could submit a public records request and get it. So there's not really any high bar I see to providing it to you contemporaneously. Other than that, what I think Mr. Foster's concern is especially in the case that he recently sent out, it's a highly emotional issue, and it's very personal. At our last council meeting, we had a room full of people telling the council what they thought about Mr. Foster's letter. And so I think that's his concern, is just not to give him a chance to resolve these issues if he can before it becomes a public issue. But if you feel, or the commission feels differently, that you'd like to see those right away, like I said, they're public documents, and it's a pretty simple amendment that we can make. And I will also just say, there are no fines associated with complaints or revocations. It's simply you either get to continue to operate or you lose your conditional use permit and are no longer allowed to operate.
And I think the timing, I guess, is good because of last week's meeting. And I think where Commissioner Dothet's going is a little bit, I know the council was pretty well blindsided with the people that came in. I happened to be at Safeway, and I thought, I'm just going to pull up YouTube real quick and see what's going on at the meeting. I was like, wow, okay, so I ran over here real quick. But I think the same thing could happen, is that these guys and whoever, that it is an emotional deal, but could start calling commissioners. And to be completely blindsided, I don't know, a little information and to be possibly prepared might be good. Also think be careful what you wish for. We might get inundated with more paperwork than we want to deal with too. But anyway, I think thanks for that. And then I think it's in your court if you'd like to make an amendment.
And Commissioner Twait, if I just could, sorry to interrupt.
No.
I would like to say that if it could be a good reason for the planning director to send out these notices, as well as advising members of the commission that they shouldn't take those phone calls because it could be coming to a hearing and you don't want to have these ex parte communications about an issue that you're going to be having an adjudicatory hearing on. So that could be a rationale to support the flow of information from the director to the commission.
Absolutely, great point.
And I just wanted to read it. That's kind of where I'm at as the commissioner, is that we're granting these and then, randomly we get phone calls from people that are fairly hot about something, and I don't even know what's in this letter. I don't know what the actual complaints were or what we're saying they got to fix, and I'm kind of just blind to the subject. If it's a public document, I would think that, me personally, I guess it's me the long and short of it, I would think that I would like to see some kind of a motion to have it in there that if a revocation or something, a letter saying you need to fix X, Y, and Z, otherwise we might move to revoke your conditional use permit, be sent or provided at our next earliest meeting or something like that to the commission, and add it to the end of the packet. Oh, by the way, these are some of the revocation letters we sent out. It's in the works, nothing's been official, they have an opportunity to do it in so many days, but this is the process going on. I would just personally like to see something in there about that, so we aren't completely blindsided, so we're in the loop a little bit more, so that we know first of the year comes around, oh, look, they did fix these, and that was, so we can consider that in when they resolved some of these issues earlier in the year, and now we're back to approving it or not, kind of thing. That's my opinion.
That's a really long amendment, if that's
It is a really long amendment. That's not really what I have.
If you could, if you want to make one, let's pare that thing down a little bit and make one, and then we've got it.
And Jeff, if just
Yeah.
to help this process, I think if you don't need to make amendments in the exact language, if you're comfortable with that, just tell me what you want, and I'll make the legislative change to the document, and I can send it out to you after this meeting so everybody can review it. But unless they're really particular issues, I feel comfortable capturing the intent of the body at this time.
Okay.
If I can add a little bit of something
Oh.
to this.
I'm going to hold you up just for a second.
Just want to make a comment.
Vice Mayor
It's-
Malloy.
And so, just to follow up on what Mr. Bloom says, like the planner said, this was a collaboration. So, he'll make whatever amendments are proposed, and we'll bring them forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Halstead.
Just to add, I definitely, I echo the concerns of Commissioner Dothett, I think to just be informed as to infractions that have happened in the past and are ongoing, not necessarily I don't think we need fully documented infractions and large documentation procedures, but to have a summary, even if it was a quarterly summary or a 1 or 2 line infraction, that we knew that this was something that was happening, and then if it was resolved or not resolved or ongoing, we would have a list that we would be able to reference, because I know that kind of blindsided some of us in the past. I think that's a great idea, but maybe caution to not be quite as verbose as, again, if we did a quarterly summary or something like that, that might be beneficial.
My problem with that, I think, is exactly if you're going to get blindsided by somebody, to me, it makes sense that if that letter goes out, a quick email to us saying, hey, this letter went out. If you get a phone call, say you can't deal with it, or something like that too. So I think quarterly one might be, the horse might be way out of the barn by then. So, Commissioner Dothett.
And I guess I'll just make an official motion that it could be something similar to the way it's written here. If instead of if the administrative official determines the permit holder is in compliance, we could just have another line that says if a notice of violation has been sent out, a letter, that we would also, as chair, people on the chair and commissioners would be able to get that letter. We should be sent that letter. I'm not sure exactly how to word it, but I think basically a one-line sentence space when a notice of a letter is sent out, that it is also notified us directly. I think that would become helpful, not so much to skew our opinion on one way or the other, but just to notice that, hey, by the way, we did this, so people aren't yelling at us because we're on the Planning and Zoning Commission and we approved this, possibly, that now we don't know why there's a violation or what got said, so to speak.
Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Commissioner Twait. I'll certainly capture that and make that change, and that will be forwarded to the City Council when they consider the ordinance. I would just like to comment on Mr. Halstead's concerns, and that is, in Ryan or Mr. Foster, I think we have about 80 conditional use permits. So for us to provide quarterly reports when really there's nothing going on, I don't think would be the best use of our time. But I'd like to remind the commission that, you know, if they got a notice or if they saw a violation letter provided by the planning commissioner, you always have the opportunity to follow up or ask the planning director, hey, at the next meeting, can you provide us a summary of how this resolved or if there's any ongoing issues? I don't know that, you know, having a formal quarterly requirement is the best way, but I would encourage you to always ask the planning director about any questions you have with any of these. And, you know, so if you get notice of something, it's completely appropriate for you to, you know, ask for him to follow up at the next meeting or something.
Commissioner Dothett.
Quick follow-up, just for a question for Mr. Foster. Just for an idea, how many letters have we sent out, maybe, and do we know of a rough idea in the last 12 months? It's not something that's happening all the time. It's a fairly rare thing, correct?
Through the chair, Commissioner Dothett. Again, specifically talking about conditional use permits, it's you know, it seems like it's maybe a handful a year for conditional use permits. And I would say, just to sort of add on, if to provide that letter, I would think there would be a benefit to have that sort of be provided to the commissions essentially in kind of real time. So whether it's something that, I don't know whether it's possible that it could be something that's emailed to the commission just as a informational, or whether it's, you know, to be included, you know, at the next, you know, meeting as informational or something at the department meeting, something along those lines. I think is quite doable. Yeah.
And I agree with that. The sooner the better that we received it could help us curb any calls or people inquiring with us. The sooner the better. But I just don't know legality or issues, how that would work with public records and being able to email. I'm not sure. But even if it's at the meeting, the closest meeting per se, to the letter, or email would be great, just so we could get it instantaneously. That'd be awesome.
All right. Mr. Greenberg out there, you have anything?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions.
Fire
Can
away.
you hear me okay?
Yep, fire away.
It says in the pre-application meeting, it seems like most of it is more just to review the packet and make sure that it's complete, and that the applicant's familiar with the conditional use process. But then it also puts the burden of understanding the comprehensive plan on the applicant. It's something that somebody might not be familiar with. During this meeting, would the planner be able to advise and provide a copy of the comprehensive plan to the applicant just so they have a good understanding of that? Because it's just not something that a person starting a business is probably going to know about or really have a concept of.
Good question, Mr. Foster.
Through the chair, Commissioner Greenberg. Yeah, that's a really big benefit of this type of meeting. Is it's not just about the application, but also about the process, because we do get for conditional use permits, you know, first-time applicants. That's probably what most of them are, and so folks aren't familiar with coming to a public hearing in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission and so on. So to really provide that information and even a little bit of maybe guidance might not be the best word, but for lack of a better word, in that, yes, people are unfamiliar, when the application says, for that review criteria, is it's consistent with the purposes of the chapter and purposes and intent of the zoning district, or the proposed use in harmony with the comprehensive plan. A lot of folks just, they're not in this world. They might not be familiar with that. So what I can do and have done in other municipalities is be able to provide a little bit of direction what that means, and whether it's sending a link to, the comprehensive plan or the zoning ordinance, but also just sort of say, this is what this question's driving at. And so I can't, again, I can't tell them how to do their application and what to say, but what I can do is I can help say, this is what this criteria is its intent is, and sort of what it's driving at, and even provide some information that would help them be able to answer that, application question or review criteria question on their own.
Yeah, thank you for that, because you're right. It's just not a part of the world that they're probably used to or understand as well. So they would need some guidance from staff on that.
Did you have anything else? Commissioner Greenberg, do you have anything else?
No, I don't think so. Thank you. Yeah.
All right,
Can you hear
thank
me?
you. Yep, we got you. Yep. Commissioner Springer.
I just have a couple comments. One, I believe, in my mind or my line of thinking, that there might be a significant amount of burden placed on the planner to put this all together. I know it's on the applicant to get it for the planner to provide to us, but on the other hand, you're going to have to be the person that gets it to us to look at and review. That's all. I'm just kind of saying that there may be a significant impact on your position to do that. The other thing I have a comment on is I actually like the economic and non-economic addition to the number 2 in the criteria, primarily because value of property can change with the way a person might paint his house. So in any type of a change in adjoining properties in the neighborhood can affect the whole neighborhood. So the economic and non-economic, I think, is an important addition to give us a little bit more leeway in how we review it. So and that's really all I had. It's just a comment on it.
Commissioner Woodard.
As far as this, like she was mentioning, this guy got a conditional use permit and then eventually added a restaurant and all this stuff. So is there a way to change it from just conditional to like limited, conditional and limited, to where they're not allowed to go beyond the specs of what they determine at first, what they're going to, what they're actually applying for, so that they can't add?
Mr. Foster.
Through the chair, Commissioner Woodard. I'd say typically how that occurs now with the current conditional use permit process is through the conditions from the commission, because again the conditional use permit, those conditions are what really would either specify or potentially limit or constrain as far as kind of where you're coming from to add that specificity to a specific project. And so sort of the tough part about that, I will say, is that it's kind of the tough part, but as well as the benefit, is that there is a set process, per zoning district and per use, we have that table that says, whether, a use is permitted or conditional use or not permitted at all. But for those that are conditional use permits, the benefit is that not every single project is necessarily would have the same impacts, and whether that's, the infrastructure, the size of the lots, the configuration of the lots, the uses that might be adjacent to a subject property for the application. So what that benefit is, it does give the commission that opportunity, and even the applicant to work with the commission to sort of craft conditions that are specific to their application. So I'd say that's how typically that works with our process that we have here. Just the other thought that sort of comes to mind is I guess I'd have to see something that would be maybe a proposed language in here, because I think the other part about it is that there's a reason why conditional use permit applications are a process for the city in Title 14. And that's based on the zoning district and the zoning makeup of the city, is that in this code there are conditional use permits for a wide range of districts for a wide range of uses that require that conditional use permit. And so basically that's what's saying is there is a burden on the applicant. There's review criteria. There's a public hearing process, and so I think sort of my other concern about trying to maybe limit it right here in the language is the concern I would have is whether you're creating such a high bar for a conditional use permit that no one can get a conditional use permit per the land use table. And and then it's just you have uses in your code that are not matching up with zoning districts. So that's my other sort of food, top of my head food for thought with trying to enter that into the code here now. And then I'll end on the idea of with those conditions and those conditions that really are the commission's conditions upon the approval, is that they could be crafted to have that specificity or potential limitations. And so it's not unusual for what we call scope creep to occur at times, where there will be additions to a property, a private property, that are going beyond what's allowed per the permit. But if there are good conditions drafted up, it gives a better potential for certainly myself to review the situation, review the existing conditional use permit, and if warranted, draft up a notice of code violation and put that on the permit holder to resolve these issues. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Mr. Bloom.
Thank you. So, Commissioner Woodward, what I understood you to ask is, if there's a conditional use permit for a certain use and other uses that require conditional use permits are being carried on without a conditional use permit, can the city take action? And the answer is absolutely. So if there's a conditional use permit for 5 cabins and there's other activities going on the property that are beyond the 5 cabins, we could certainly issue a notice of revocation or try and resolve that. Sometimes there is gray area though, and I think that's what Ryan's getting at, is that it's up to the the commission to really specify any additional conditions. For example, 5 rental cabins, does that include being able to provide food for the people that are staying at the cabins? Does it include having a fire pit for them to congregate around? you know, there's some certainly limits that are outside those gray areas that we will enforce. And then there's sometimes we're not really sure what the commission meant when they approved 5 cabin rentals. You know, does that include feeding the clients? Does that include having entertainment for the clients? But we certainly, when there are other issues that are beyond the scope of the permit that's issued, we will enforce those. But I think what Ryan's emphasizing, what I want to emphasize is that when the conditional use permits are issued, like what we heard today from the public, maybe adopting some of those limitations that are being proposed in the application as conditions would be a good idea for the commission to put in there.
Commissioner Dothett.
Yeah, I just think that would kind of fall into number 6 on page 9, where it says any and all specific conditions deemed necessary by the commission to fulfill. That's where we would set those specific conditions. It says, but we'd have to be very specific with these, and obviously, possibly in the past, they haven't had a lot of very stringent, specific, okay, you may only have 5 cabins, and one, there may no be food, no food service, or, you know, those are the kind of things that would have to be specified, so it's more black and white. Otherwise, it does leave it open for some gray areas in there, and I can see that. And that just moving forward, we just need to know as a commission to use that number 6 to our advantage to give some teeth for the enforcement side of things, to say X, Y, and Z doesn't mean you can do all these other things. You know, this specifically means these specific things, and try to close some of those gaps. And I could see where that would come in.
Yeah.
It's already there, kind of. It just hasn't been used appropriately possibly in the past. And we can use this number 6 to do that.
Mr. Bloom, question for you. Is there any way to, at the yearly review, we'll say, which I know is fairly an informal event that we don't see at the commission, but once we've granted a conditional use permit, and say it was we'll just use Angler as an example, and we didn't put any time frame as far as quiet time goes, and all of a sudden we pass one and we say we'd like quiet time to be this. And I think that came up this summer with one. And then all of a sudden they were like, well, wait a minute, there's a bunch of them in here that don't have any quiet time attached to them. Why are you singling me out? Can we take an existing conditional use permit, bring it to us and amend it or go through that process, or is it starting all over again?
Thank you, Chair Twait. We don't have a process for amending them formally at this time. There are cases where, based on complaints, we've worked out agreements with the conditional use permit holders to, you know, hey, your neighbors are complaining. Can you agree not to play music after 10 o'clock or something like that? So we've done that as administration. There's not a process in code to do that as a commission. And I just want to make sure that the commission understands, and this may be something you want to address, the annual reports are not maybe what you all anticipate. I mean, it's just the conditional use permit holders are sent a form, they fill it out, we double check that they're current on their taxes, that they don't owe the city any money for anything, and that's basically it. It's not we had 12 complaints on this property, and you know, we want to bring it to your attention. However, the commission can always, you know, if you're hearing complaints from the public, you can see whether or not the conditions are being violated. And you can start you know, ask for an investigation to be conducted and hold a hearing if you thought that there was reason to do so.
All right, thank you. And I guess, I know you said you had a proposed amendment, but one of the questions I have is regarding them being present for their conditional use permit. And my thoughts were, we spend money advertising, so we collect a fee, we advertise, and if they don't show up, to me, the right answer is to go ahead and postpone it to the next meeting, or if there's something that came up with them and they can say, we'd like to postpone it to a date certain, do that. But if they've kicked it down the road 2 meetings or so, is the right thing to do is to deny it and then they have to resubmit and start over again? And again, I think you have a proposed amendment maybe, so this might be a good time.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Twait. Yeah, so one of the problems with denying it is that they can't reapply for 9 months if it's denied. So what I was going to propose, just so the commission's aware, it is a $250 application fee to apply for a conditional use permit. What I was going to suggest is that if the applicant doesn't show up without any prior notice, I mean, you're here at the hearing and nobody shows up and, you know, it's not just your time, but maybe there's a lot of people from the public that have come too. I don't think it's too hard to expect people to provide some sort of notice. I mean, they have plenty of notice when their hearing's going to be, and they can certainly provide notice to the commission, and I would assume the commission will work with them if they provided prior notice. But if no notice is provided and nobody shows up, I was going to suggest that the application be dismissed, which is different than denied, because you're not having a hearing, you're not denying it, you're just dismissing it, and they can reapply at any time and pay the $250 application fee again.
Perfect. So do we need to just nod our heads in agreement with that, or do we need someone to make that amendment?
Yeah, so I don't really, I know Commissioner Dothett made a motion and an amendment. I didn't hear a vote on it.
We did not, you are correct.
And so maybe you could do both and just, you know, ask for unanimous consent, and then when you vote on the main motion, those would be included.
Okay. So can we read, or do we have, you want to restate that first one that you had?
Basically, just that we would get, as commission, amendment that we would get notification of any letters sent out for violation letters, and do that as efficiently as possible to us via email and or at the next closest meeting, whichever's legal wise, I guess.
And then also add the dismissal for the,
There's a lot of verbiage there, I gotta remember. And also to be able to do a dismissal notice if somebody fails to show up for their hearing, and they would have to resubmit the $250 application fee and reapply if they don't give prior notice.
okay, and you're going to ask for unanimous consent?
And I'm gonna ask for unanimous
All
consent.
right, any objections to that? All right, seeing none.
Can I get a second?
Oh, I guess we do
I'll
need a second
second.
first. Okay. Okay, so we got a motion and a second for unanimous consent with those. Okay, I want to talk to Mr. Foster about the pre-application meeting. Most of the time, and I think I can think of a handful of times where it's come to us and the planning director or planner has recommended not approving one, but do you think that having this pre-application meeting should take most of those situations out where we wouldn't necessarily have one that would come as a recommending disapproval of it? So I would assume that should be very helpful, getting that whole process going. That should be a much cleaner packet at that point. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, Chair Tway, yeah, that's a big benefit of the pre-application meeting, is a lot of, applications that aren't, meeting code that an applicant be notified that, the application that they have or their notion of their project, if it doesn't meet, the zoning code or something along those lines, maybe it's the, development standards, of their project, that information can be shared with the applicant, and it keeps applications that have serious issues with them from coming in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission for a public hearing, as well as it gives an opportunity to have early, again, this is pre-application meeting. This is before we even actually get an application to, flip through and make sure it's complete. And so early on, we can work with the applicant. I can bring in other departments as well, whether it's, building or fire or the relevant, departments to come in to basically troubleshoot, issues that they might have with their application. And so that's a big benefit of this type of meeting, and does keep, I think it helps the applicant have a higher quality application by the time it reaches the commission for consideration.
Okay, another thing I had was regarding Mrs. Baldwin's comments about the Board of Adjustments, and this might be Mr. Bloom and you to answer this, as far as having the commission, the commission's decision represented at the Board of Adjustments. I'm curious about that. I don't know what is the right thing. I know it should be somebody other than the chairman. He shouldn't have to go to it, so.
Thank you, Commissioner Twait. So I'm not 100% sure I understood the concern, but the commissions, when they're making a decision, they're acting in a adjudicatory capacity, which is sort of like a judge. And in the court, when a judge is appealed, the judge's decision is appealed, nobody represents the judge at the next stage in the hearing. The judge's decision, as your decision, should stand on its own based on the findings that you make, and that decision and those findings are before the Board of Adjustment when they make their decision. Also, I would note that the planner makes a report and reports on the decision in his report. What is somewhat unique in our code that is not universal to other codes is that when the decision by the Planning Commission is reviewed by the Board of Adjustment, no deference is given to the Planning Commission's decision. And the Board of Adjustment holds what's called a de novo hearing, which means that they listen to all the evidence again, and they even take new evidence that may not have been before the Planning Commission. It can be set up differently to where the Board of Adjustment reviews the Commission's decision and gives them deference, which means that even if maybe they disagreed, if the Commission made a decision that was supported by the evidence and it is based on the substantial evidence, even if the board thought there was a better decision, they would let that decision stand. But that's not how our code is set up. Right now, our board holds a de novo hearing with no deference given to the Commission's decision, and the Commission is not represented other than that the board has its decision and findings, and the planner provides a report whether he's a party or not.
Okay, and I think that just further clarifies the importance of having good findings, because that is basically some of the information they will use to make a decision with us not being there, correct?
Absolutely. I think, if your findings are strong, it's much more difficult for the Board of Adjustment to come to a different conclusion.
Okay. And then the last thing, and again, this might fall back on Mr. Bloom as well, but we notice people within 300 feet, 500 feet, I can't remember what it is, and that sometimes becomes a problem because it's maybe only one property owner on either side of the applicant. And is that opening up a can of worms to try to expand that to a larger group of people? If it's quarter acre lots in town in a suburban residential district, it's maybe 10 people potentially. If you get out in the rural residential area, it could just be 2 people. And I think that sometimes feels like they're being somewhat disenfranchised in their opportunity to know that something was coming down the pike.
Thank you. That might be a better question for Mr. Foster to answer. I don't know what kind of burden that would place. I would ask Mr. Foster, though, and maybe this could be a substitute for expanding it, would be, is there a posting requirement for a conditional use permit? So if even if neighbors weren't specifically notified, if they drove by that property every day and saw that it, you know, that there was a posting, that there was a conditional use permit, that might be another avenue.
Mr. Foster?
Yeah, Chair Twait, so this is, it's actually under public hearing notification, so it wouldn't be just conditional use permits, so it'd be, you know, variances or really any other application that requires a public hearing. And so it is 300 feet. I'll just say that that's a standard that you'll find, you know, throughout the country. But I don't think there's any reason why it couldn't be considered for an adjustment. I would say one thing is just to really the intent of that is that those within that 300 feet of the subject property, those property owners get that basically an additional notification. They get a postcard mailed to them. So that so per the code, it really gives somebody within that 300 feet that they're the ones to be most impacted, you know, by the application, you know, if it were to be approved. And certainly those outside that 300-foot radius, I think the practice has been that folks from the community can still, you know, provide public testimony during a public hearing. It's just the idea is that you know, the commission might have different weight if somebody's within 300 feet of their concerns and consideration, if they're a property owner within 300 feet, than if somebody who's 2 miles away, you know, comes to a public hearing where maybe they're not as impacted as somebody nearby. So that's just sort of the just to cover the kind of rationale for providing that kind of notification. I don't see why it couldn't be reconsidered. I would say one thing that does occur that I would want to sort of see and think about is, depending on how that changes, would increase cost and notification for the city. Where there have been projects I've worked in on the municipalities where sometimes notifications in a dense, you know, area would require, you know, hundreds of notifications to go out, and there is a cost associated with that. But again, I'd say there's no reason why that radius couldn't be, you know, looked at and considered, but it would be under public hearings, not just for conditional use permits. Okay. And I'll end on, I'll end on that. That's just one of the notifications. So, you know, we post here, we post an ad in the newspaper. So there's the whole idea is that there's a number of ways that public hearings get noticed. You know, the packet's posted on, you know, the commissioner's, you know, web page and so on. And so the idea is to provide sort of a number of ways to provide that notification to the community. So if somebody's interested in attending a public hearing, they can.
My concern with that, I guess, is, and this is, we'll use Angler again as an example. Come November or December, there's nobody hardly down that road, and if you have to be signs posted, everybody else is in Arizona, they're not going to get a postcard, and it may slip through the cracks a little bit. I just, and the only reason I'm even bringing it up is because I've sat on this thing long enough that that's one of the biggest gripes people have, is that they didn't get any notification. So I just think if there's any way to do it cleanly, and probably nobody knows this answer, how long has this fee been $250? Is it time to make it $300 and then we can cover some more postage? All right. Just again, I don't know what it is. If it's been if it's been $250 for a long time, I mean, it puts another little bit of a burden on the applicant, which I think is okay. Again, if that's what we're trying to, if they're gonna try to change the neighborhood a little bit. So. Anyone else? Commissioner Dothett.
Real quick, with the you had brought up the possibility of amending a conditional use permit. Would that be something we could do possibly of a reconsideration at their annual reviews? Or if we were to put amendment in there, they could be amended upon their renewal? Or I just don't know how that would, if we could start cleaning up some of these conditional use permits that might be getting a few complaints here and there at the first of each year when their renewal's up. We've had X number of complaints about these are the complaints that we're now going to get notified of. We could bring that up as a possibility of doing amendments, and they would, on their reapplication of some kind, or I don't know how that would work.
Mr. Foster.
Through the chair, Commissioner Duff. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I think that's an interesting idea. What it makes me sort of think about is that there are times where there's an application that has multiple uses, and so the process has been that, you know, one application can have additional uses, but those have always been sort of separated out with their own standing resolutions, because that's how it's set up in the code, that zoning district, that use, conditional use permits required. And so that's been the approach for that consideration. I'll say that's certainly been my approach in the time I've been with the city. I'll say historically that's not always been the case. And so sort of thinking of it that way, that I'm just not quite sure how to amend it, where, let's say, if they obviously have an existing conditional use permit, they got at least one use, they're looking to amend and add another one, I certainly would think that would require a public hearing. I just don't know if perhaps they need to go through and just do a whole separate application for that additional use, which would keep their existing use still separated, not considered. Because that was my concern with an amendment, is does that open up their existing conditional use permit for consideration and potentially be approved or denied, you know, at a hearing. So amendment, I'm not sure. I'd have to think about it more and maybe do a little bit of research. But
And really, I wasn't talking about so much a whole nother use.
Yeah.
You say there, as a practice, us as a commission being able to amend it and set, like underneath, we're talking about more restrictions, like, okay.
yeah.
For
you know,
noise
we
or
could
something like
amend it
that.
At the first of the year, okay, you're up for renewal. Here's what we've proposed for, before we move forward with this, these issues have come up. We want to set X, Y, and Z. You know, we want to impose quiet hours on your permit now. We've seen issues with that. We want to impose an amendment to this. If you want to continue to have this permit, we want to see quiet hours between, 10 to 6 or something like that. And that would be where we could make adjustments to some of these antiquated permits when they're up for renewal at the beginning each year. And I didn't know if that was something we could do it as an amendment in here, is to say, you know, at the first of the year when they're up for renewal, we could do adjustments to them, so to speak. I don't know if that's something, or how we would word that, or if it's something we could do. I'm just trying to think of how we can clean up some of these older permits that now aren't quite fitting into to it.
I know the answer. Mr. Bloom.
Thank you. So there is one opportunity that's available, I think, to amend, and that's when permits are transferred. That would be an opportunity, you know, the commission has to approve a transfer, and that might be an opportunity to say, hey, look, it's a new user, we've been getting lots of complaints, you need to be quiet after 10 o'clock. My concern about imposing new conditions on an existing conditional use permit that's not being transferred, or there's not some new use, is that people might argue that they have a property right. Look, you granted me this conditional use permit for 20 years. This is my business plan. This is how I've been doing it, and now, you know, you just want to change my business plan. I think people could argue that they've, you know, relied on the conditions that were imposed on them, and for you to impose new conditions would not be fair to them. I think, again, I know there's these old ones, so they do lapse. If they're not used for a year, they go away. If they're transferred, you can not approve the transfer, or you could impose new conditions at that time. Otherwise, I think it's just this is probably a good lesson for all of us, that when we consider these, we really need to think about them and really put conditions on that are enforceable, because we can only revoke conditional use permits for violations of the conditions in the permit, or other offenses of other violations of the planning and zoning code. But it's, you know, if somebody, I don't know, if somebody's like, they have a conditional use permit and maybe they're using that, you know, to steal cars or something that's not a planning and zoning issue and not an issue in the conditional use permit, we can't necessarily revoke for those activities that aren't specified in the permit or otherwise a violation of the planning code.
Thank you.
Anything else? Commissioner Greenberg?
I don't really have anything.
All right. All right, I believe it looks like all the discussion is complete. I will say, before we vote, that obviously there's another opportunity for public hearing in 2 weeks, or next week, at the city council meeting. So, and I would like to thank everybody for coming out. It's one of these little civics lessons that it's good to have you guys here. It's good for us to hear it, and you should read your comp plan. You should know your comp plan. That's what you need to know. And with that, we will call the roll, please. The main motion as amended.
Commissioner Halsted,
Yes.
Commissioner Woodard,
Yes.
Commissioner Greenberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Douthit,
Yes.
Commissioner Springer,
Yes.
Chair Twait.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. I'll maybe take a quick couple minutes. You guys probably are all going to leave, and we'll let you guys file out if that's the plan here. We'll take 5 minutes. All right, we're gonna go back on the record. We will move right on here now. Item G, unfinished business, H, new business, and I, pending items. We have none. Takes us to J, reports. J1 is City Council, Councilman Winger.
Yes, thank you. I have had the pleasure of filling in tonight for Mr. Glendenning, who is in California watching the White Sox game with the A's. So Jim asked me to fill in, and it is definitely my pleasure. It's been a great discussion tonight. So we had a city council meeting last week on Wednesday. Some of the things that we heard, I'll just address. We were sidebarred with that violation letter from the people. We had a full house here, so we definitely got I don't even know what the good word is for it. There was a strong presence, and we had to, like deer in headlights, try to figure out what just happened. So they did come in and let us know that this letter was sent out, and they will be in the attendance of the next meeting. So I would encourage everybody to come, because we're going to have two very opposing groups on this issue. So bring us up, yes. So some of the things that we had was Ordinance 3234-2021, which is increasing the estimated revenues and appropriations in the Airport Improvements Capital Fund, amending the city's professional services agreement with HDL Engineering Consultants, and accepting grant funding from the Federal Aviation Administration, and issuing a purchase order for construction of the 2021 Airfield Drainage Rehabilitation Project at the Kenai Municipal Airport, which passed by the body. Secondly, we, through Ordinance 3235-2021, we accepted and appropriated a grant from the state of Alaska for the purchase of library books. I apologize, I don't have more numbers for you, but I think that's roughly around $7,000 that we accepted. And that as well passed from the body. The third ordinance was 3236-2021, which was amending the official zoning map by rezoning I wrote over my notes. T5NR11W, Section 6, Seward Meridian, KN North. That's 150 feet of government lot, 34 from suburban residential to general commercial. I believe you guys had seen that. Is that correct? Yes. And that as well passed. Then we had Ordinance 3237, which is increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the general fund, a land administration department to provide funding for the Kenai waterfront revitalization feasibility study. That as well passed. So we will be doing a study that we will hopefully get some answers, and we will have additional work sessions on that coming up. We also had Ordinance 3244, which was increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the general municipal roadway improvement capital project funds, awarding a construction contract and authorizing the issuance of a purchase order for the 2021 Bryson Avenue Bluff Erosion repair project. So this specific one was both introduced, seconded, and a motion for adoption, and that as well passed. And then resolution number 2021-56 was approving the vacation of the 10-foot utility easement alongside the lot lines of 1920-21, Block 13, the Carl F. Alstrom subdivision, Plat KN 216, and Lot 22A, Block 13, Carl F. Ostrom subdivision, RPM's replat, which was excluding the 15 feet adjoining Kenai Spur Highway and 10 feet adjoining northeast boundary as set forth by the attached exhibit that they gave us. It was not needed for public purpose, and consenting to its vacation, and that as well passed. Some of our new items coming up at this upcoming September 15th council meeting will be we will be hearing about Ordinance 3243 that you guys discussed tonight on the conditional use permits. We will have the public commenting. We will also be hearing about the election ordinance, which, Bob, I don't have that ordinance offhand, if you don't mind plugging that in. I want to say it was 3224, but I could be wrong. What was it? Okay, so ordinance 3224 is what we've confirmed, and that's the election changes, co-changes that Vice Mayor Malloy and our clerk Jamie Hines have put forth, and we will have public discussion on that. And that is pretty much all I have for my report. Again, I encourage everybody to come to this upcoming September 15th meeting.
Anyone have any questions? All right, we'll move on. No Vice Chair Fikes for Kenai Borough Planning, so we'll go to Administration. Mr. Foster.
Thank you, Chair Twait. Staff does not have any items for the September 22nd meeting. So that would make this Willie's last planning and zoning meeting with us, and yeah, I'm freaking out here. But I just want to say, Willie's been the city for I think at least 8 years. I've only worked with Willie for a brief amount of time, about eight or 9 months. And I'll just say it's great to have worked with you, even if it's been a short amount of time. I'll definitely miss your hard work, your due diligence, like you're so self-motivated. All that's really appreciated. Daily, and I think everybody knows that the entire department is just the two of us, and so it's really just crucial that we work as a team, and I think we really have. And I just feel like the success of the department is very much based on the hard work that Willie's done. And I just say she's a wonderful colleague to work with, and very much be missed. So thank you, Willie.
Can I say something?
Of course.
I just wanted to tell you all goodbye. I have been blessed to work for the city of Kenai. It's been such a wonderful experience, and I will miss everybody. I will miss my job most of the time. It's been wonderful getting to know you a little bit, each of you, and I say I will miss the city, but I think I just need to move in a different direction, and that's, So, thank you all for putting up with me.
Do we have to approve that? Because we could make a motion to just make you stay. Ryan did say it's been 8 or 9 months, but it felt like 8 or 9 years, so I don't know what that meant exactly. But all right,
Can I
well.
say one more thing?
Yeah, I
didn't
suppose.
tell-
Yeah.
I just wanted to acknowledge that Ryan has been a wonderful boss, and I think we make a great team. And of all the planners I've worked for, he's been the most positive, open boss, and I've really enjoyed working with you.
Well, then you should stay. Okay, well, any questions for Mr. Foster? All right. Additional public comment. Please come forward.
Christine Schmidt, 513 Ash Avenue again. I just wanted to give a little history here. The notices that used to go out to people of conditional use permits and subdivision plats and so forth used to be sent certified mail to people in the 300-foot radius. And since the city went to the postcards, I think that's where all the complaints have come from the citizens, because they might not notice the postcard. They think it's just a ad from someone, and so they just toss it. Whereas when you got your certified mail, letter, you opened it and you really got it. And so I feel like the applicant, as a business person, should be paying the costs of doing things like that. I don't think that the city or the citizen should be, subsidizing those costs. And I'd sure like to see the city go back to that process of having them. I know the city could hire someone to do these notices, or figure out some way to so that the staff wouldn't have to literally do it themselves, and then make the applicant pay for it. The other thing is the 300 feet. The borough has a half-mile radius for conditional use permits, so I think you could that's definitely more than 300 feet. So you could definitely look at increasing that, although probably not through this ordinance. But I just want to say those signs are too small. Okay, they're just too small. Now you can go to any city in the United States when you're looking at those kind of zoning signs, and they're usually really big, like this, and where you could read them from the sidewalk or the street. But here, the ones that we have here, these little 11 by 17 signs, you just can't see them. You have to stop your car, get out, and go over to look at them, and it's just really hard. So I think that we should take a look at improving that too. Thanks.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Malloy.
For some of the other stuff that was discussed that are in other ordinances, I would encourage you, particularly Commissioner Duffett, if you get elected, and good luck with your campaign, to look at those items, because, as you all know, we're always a changing, evolving city, and, the laws can be changed and modified as we need, so it's been a pleasure to work with Mr. Twade all these years. He's been in that seat longer than I was ever up there, and everything. And definitely appreciate all your service, and appreciate all your public service to the city. Thanks again.
Thank you. I should go with you, maybe.
That's all up to you.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah.
All right, we'll move on. We got some informational items. All three of those decisions from the Board of Adjustments are there to read, and probably some good nuggets of stuff that we could use in the future. It might be helpful for us too, so make sure and do that. Next meeting will not be the 22nd, it appears, unless something happens quickly. But if
I have nothing to send to you.
nothing, yeah,
Nothing.
see, it's just like that. You're lame duck now.
Yeah.
So that would put our first meeting in October, would be our next meeting then. And with that, we'll go to commissioners' comments and questions. Mr. Greenberg.
Hi, I just wanted to thank Bob for his work on the hear that?
Oh, we can hear you, kind of.
Mike,
Oh,
I'm sorry. Well, thank you, Councilmember Malloy, for all your hard work.
all right.
Thank you.
Commissioner Woodard.
Just want to say congratulations to Willie, and I hope you enjoy retirement. I'm certainly enjoying it.
Commissioner Dothett.
Well, I was going to say I'm not going to be here on the 22nd, but I don't have to worry about that, I guess.
Commissioner Halstead.
Just to say that, Willie, you will be missed, and thank you for keeping me under control for the time that I've been here. That's been a job of itself, I'm sure. Yeah, you're definitely going to have some very important shoes to be filled. So I think you guys were overwhelmed when it was just the two of you. Now we got just Ryan. So, but at the same time, Mr. Foster, I appreciate all of your hard work and efforts that you've put in the short time that you've been here, which actually isn't that short anymore. I've seen some very big improvements, and I appreciate the efforts that you've put into. I think we're making positive steps, and as Mr. Malloy said, we're constantly evolving, and you've helped make that process a lot easier for us with your presentations and just the information that you're putting forth with. And I look forward to the changes that will be made in this that we've discussed today. That's it for me. I'll stop talking. I'll shut up now. It's also nice to see you here.
All right, I'm going to have Councilman Winger. She wants to add something real quick. Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead and do it.
Thank you. Just one thing on those informational items. I'd like to encourage you guys to look through that. The one comment that we had the most, which I heard tonight, was those parameters, so those limits, so that there isn't gray areas, so that we understand what your intentions are, putting in no food service, no bonfires, no music, putting in those, no dogs on premises, leash your children, just some sort of parameters for us. And then that'll help us to better decipher when we go into those 3 appeals in the month of July. So that's what we spent our July on. And it just really came down to, which I heard a lot of comment in this tonight, which is why I wanted to address that, is please feel free to put those boundaries on it. It definitely will help us in our decision if anything comes to us. I did agree as well with, having the information or those violations that come out is great. But again, too, for like the body, we can't take those calls and we can't have that information. So I can see where that would be split on both sides. I don't think that so much falls for you guys, but for the council body, it definitely, those contexts do come into play. But again, I just wanted to make quick mention to look those over and just maybe in your head think what type of parameters could we have set on this to maybe avoided that. So thank you for all your guys' work. I know this isn't easy, and you guys do get a lot on your plate, so thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Springer.
Well, mainly, I just got to say thank you to Willie for the work she's provided or done for the city, and even outside of the planning and zoning, and what you took care of upstairs there was helpful to me at many, many times. So thank you.
All right, and I guess I will just add the same comment basically. Council Member Vice Mayor Malloy and both you and Willie cast big shadows, big feet to fill, and I'm sure the city will do its very best to do that. And to Vice Mayor Malloy, if by chance Commissioner Dothett takes a seat on the council, there will be a vacancy at Planning and Zoning. Maybe you should have that application in there. So with that, and again, I'd like to say, again, thank you to Ms. Schmidt for showing up. It's good to see you again. So thank you for coming. And with that, all the business is complete. The meeting is adjourned.